Hello there, this is How to Murder Time, a podcast about books and things.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. We're supposed to say hello here.
Yes, say hello here. So I need to get better at distributing the scripts. Hello, it's a book one again. I think there was a bank holiday or something, so I'm terribly confused as to how long it was since last we were here. But yes, this time we're doing The Graveyard book by Neil Gaiman. This was the winner in, oh God, I've lost my notes. Great start.
2009.
2009, there we go. Yes. Do you want me to read the back of the book? That's always a good bit. Okay.
If we want a unrealistic version of the book, then yes.
I begin to think these aren't written by the author. Nobody Owens, known to his friends as Bod, is a normal boy. He would be completely normal if he didn't live in a graveyard being raised and educated by ghosts. There are dangers and adventures for Bod in the graveyard, but it is in the land of the living that the real danger lurks, for it is there that the man Jack lives, and he has already killed Bod's family. A deliciously dark masterwork by best-selling author Neil Gaiman with illustrations by award-winning Chris Riddell. Yeah, there you go. So
you can see why the guy that wrote that doesn't write novels for a living. He writes the blurbs at the back of books. I don't
mind that so much. So I just hope that whoever's written the blurb on the back has actually read the book. I think that's probably important, but I suspect less important than I think it is, that line of work. Anyway, whose pick was this?
Mine.
Hey, there we go. And why did we pick this one?
It was short and the last one was long.
Everyone's still recovering from Hyperion.
That was one of the main reasons.
Okay,
the other reason was I like Neil Gaiman's writing, and I haven't read this in a very long time. And as far as I can remember, I liked it, but that was about all I remembered about it.
Yeah, I'd never come across this one before. I mean, as far as I know, he's won twice. I think in previous years, I forget which year, he'd won with American Gods, which I had read, and is a bit much more of a doorstopper and a much more of a grown-up sort of thing. This is very much a kid's book. There's no getting away from it at all. And yeah, I quite enjoyed the overall pacing of it. Quite light, quite engaging.
I think that sentence explains part of the problem. Is that I like this book despite the fact that it's children's book.
Yes, look, yeah.
Good children's books are really, really good books. Well, this is a good children's book. And I love Winnie the Pooh and have reread it many more times than I have Hyperion, for instance. And I'm not going to use that as to beat you over the head with every time. Yes. But there are many, many books that are high quality that I don't read as much as I do children's books.
I still read quite a bit of young adult fiction that I've had for decades, so I still go back to some now and then. I mean, I suppose that does sort of say more about me than the book. Yeah, my sort of parochial nature and pigeonholing. There was a good quote
from Neil Gaiman when he won the Newbery Medal, because this won a lot of awards.
Yeah, this one here, the one I got here says it won the Carnegie Medal as well in 2010.
The British Carnegie Medal and the American Newbery Medal, which are both for children's books. It's the first time the same work has won both. And what he sort of said in his acceptance speech, it was as if some people believed there was a divide between the books that you were permitted to enjoy and those that were good for you. I was expected to choose sides. We were all expected to choose sides, and I didn't believe it. I still don't. I was and still am on the side of books you love. And I think you shouldn't have to say, is it a great book, is it a good book, or is it an enjoyable book?
Or work to some assumption that there's a kind of educational remit for anything designed for children, I suppose. Yeah, this is just a fun, relatively light-hearted read. I say relatively light-hearted because there's a fair bit of sort of stark and grim imagery throughout the book. I mean,
it is a children's book after all.
Well, quite. I don't know. I did look it up actually on Amazon. I think the Literary Times give it a reading age of 9 to 11. So I don't know if that's necessarily who it was pitched at, but that's what experts recommend in terms of just giving the book to a kid to enjoy for themselves. I can't really see this being a sort of bedtime stories with a 5-year-old type of thing.
I did see a report by someone who said that they'd been trying to get their child to sort of start to listen to audiobooks in the car, and they then put this on, and their child was 4. And they loved this book, the story about the boy in the graveyard. So I think 4 may be a little young for most people, though.
So how did you get on then, John, given the reading age of 11?
I think it's possibly my level when it comes to Hugo books, because I also really enjoyed Harry Potter.
Yeah.
It is odd. We did the last 2 books which I really enjoyed have been kids' books, and there's probably only 2 books in the entire Hugo slate which were kids' books.
So we're talking about the Harry Potter and was it Goblet of Fire or the Prisoner of something? Or it was Goblet of Fire, wasn't it? Yeah, we did that. I remember. I was there. I remember now. Yes, yes.
There's something about well-written children's books tend to be much better with language, with just general descriptions and pacing and everything than some of the other books which tend to win.
Yeah. Well, I suppose if you're writing for children, there's obviously, the Neil Gaiman quote notwithstanding, there is a certain need for clarity and directness, which often gets lost. I'll be the first to admit Hyperion went all over the place at loss at the time, but I quite enjoyed that aspect of it. But
there's a discipline, and Hyperion did not have that discipline, I think a lot of the other books we've read may not have. They've all been sort of longer than they needed to be. Sometimes having an entire third at the back of the book where it just goes off and does random stuff.
Yeah.
Kids' books, I think, really are underestimated as just exactly how good they are. If you look at all the sort of books that people remember, you got stuff like. Also, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and all of his books.
A lot of the Roald Dahl stuff.
They're all incredibly well-crafted things which sort of live on a lot longer than their contemporary books.
And I imagine kids are probably quite brutal critics when it comes to this sort of stuff as well. I mean, when you're sort of 9 to 11, you don't really feel the need to persevere on through it because you think you need to know what, it's a worthy endeavour to read this book, like many of the Hugo winners, I guess. If they don't like it, they're going to drop it and it won't sell. So presumably you're either a very good kids writer or you don't sell any books in that space.
It reminded me, it had a melancholy grandeur to it, in that the melancholy was from growing up. At the end, is sad because he's growing up, and that was inevitable. But it reminded me of the end of The House at Pooh Corner, where he's going away to boarding school and explaining to Pooh why he won't be around anymore, and that's heartbreaking. And also in The Jungle Book, where Mowgli is leaving to go back to the human world. And again, they're both really sad, but they're written from the point of view of growing up's really sad. You don't get to be a child anymore.
Gets explored in Toy Story 2 as well, I believe.
Absolutely.
Where
and that's
Andy's getting too old for the kids. And it's a similar
that's an absolutely great children's story as well.
Yeah, similar story sort of thing. So it's called The Graveyard Book, and I totally didn't spot the Jungle Book reference at all until way afterwards when I was researching notes. But it essentially follows that very similar form. It's outcast human child raised by strange creatures, and told as a series of small self-contained short stories which take place. I can't remember if in Jungle Book it's Mowgli growing up over a long period of time, or whether that all happens sort of fairly randomly. But certainly the Graveyard Book's chapters are sort of paced. I think it's 8 chapters, and they take place roughly every 2 years of Bod's life. And it opens in media res, as it were. It opens with the man Jack, who is painted as this really sinister sort of, professional assassin, just man with a knife, and the knife itself gets lovingly described very early on. And he's basically in Bod's house. Bod's a toddler in a crib at this point, and has already murdered the parents and sister, and is now looking for Bod to kill him. And we get no reason why, no sort of explanation of this at all. Just very visceral immediacy going on in that section, and as an opener, that is absolutely, I'd say terrifying. Yes,
it is really scary, and it is grim. Absolutely designed to grab you.
I was looking at the kid-friendly cover several times at the point of this and thinking, "Hang on, has there been some mistake here?"
I think it's the second paragraph which I loved, which is the knife had done almost everything it was brought to that house to do.
Yeah,
both the blade and the handle were wet.
It's like it opens with the knife as the main
beautifully.
character.
That's really nasty. Without mentioning blood, it just says the knife and the handle were, the blade and the handle were wet.
So I suppose perhaps as a kid you might not fully interpret that as meaning what it means, but certainly as an adult reading that, it's quite brutal. And here is a grown man with a knife looking for a baby in a crib to quite clearly, obviously murder. And we get no reason why or anything like that. It's just bam, straight into it. And if that's not a gripping opener, I don't know what is. But so Bod, I don't think he has the name Bod at this point. He just has no name at all. He just because of a sort of love of exploration and mischievousness, he's managed to clamber out of his cot and go scampering down the stairs out of the house and down the road to the graveyard at the end of the street. He doesn't realise he's being hunted or anything like that. He's just a wide-eyed child toddling. Gets found by the ghosts, the inhabitants of the graveyard, and this base of the graveyard basically forms the setting for most of the rest of the book. And there, at that point, the various ghosts. Does Bod spot the ghosts? Or the ghosts just see him anyway and pick him up?
The ghosts spot him, because he's an unusual thing to see in a graveyard. He's young enough to see the ghosts. And then his mum, who's just been murdered, because she's just died, can speak to ghosts, comes and says, can you look after
sort
my
of temporary
baby?
angered spirit sort of thing. And again, there's more really hard imagery going on there as well. The sort of terrified mother clinging on past death just because of fear of what's going to happen to her child.
Yeah, it's a very Neil Gaiman idea, that, isn't it? He's comfortable with these concepts.
Yeah. So there's a various motley collection of ghosts who've died at various periods of history across this graveyard. They're all just doing their little graveyard business. There's like a little small society there, and in toddles this child. They don't know what to do with it. They're sort of umming and ahhing about whether to let the child go or hide it and take it is one of them. And then the lady in grey turns up. This mysterious sort of grey spectre on a large horse turns up and tells them they should be charitable, at which point they decide to keep the child and adopt it, raise it in the graveyard. This then imbues the child with the freedom of the graveyard, something like that, and a series of ghost-like powers, the ability to not be noticed, to fade, to see the dead, that sort of thing, and hear them. And basically,
see in the dark.
See in the dark and so on. And so basically, it sort of sets the stage for a very Jungle Book style thing where instead of animals, it's the animals of the jungle. It's the undead and the monsters of the graveyard raising this child, and it's generally a stable, caring, and loving environment. The adoptive parents, Mr. and Mrs. Owens, who sort of died in sort of 1400s or something, they raise the child well, and I think it grows up in the crypt. And we're introduced to the graveyard caretaker, a chap called Silas.
Silas
who seems to be something quite different at this point, and he volunteers to become the child's guardian, to sort of go out and find regular live people food and so on, and provide for the child and look after it. And then Silas, using strange mind hypnotism powers, makes the man Jack, who'd followed the trail to the graveyard, go a bit weird in the head and forget the child was there and forget he was looking for the child, and basically just sends the killer away. So at that point, you're already setting up for a kind of reckoning, a kind of coming in age. I'm thinking Shere Khan again, but you're getting this sort of preparation for something quite climactic going on at the far end of this story, because presumably there's going to be a reckoning with this killer.
Yeah, I mean, first thing you notice is that Neil Gaiman does, like Terry Pratchett, loves death. Death is a character in their own right, and death is always interesting if they're writing it. So you've got death with the capital letters in the Pratchett books, and in Neil Gaiman's stories, death is almost always a woman. So Death in the Sandman books is this beautiful goth girl, and in this, it's the woman on the horse. She brings everybody to from one side of the curtain to the other.
It's a sort of cameo role, though. I think she only appears once else in the book. She's not really about her at all.
But she seems kind, and I think if you're teaching kids about death, teaching them that death is kind is not the worst idea in the world. So it felt like, yes, this is, let's have death for kids. Let's have death for kids is on a horse, because that's cool and kind.
Yeah, because I mean, like I say, if your 4-year-old's listening to an audiobook in the car, one of the first questions they're going to be is, what is a graveyard? And from there, things are going to get awkward and probably quite complicated. But, it's approached with a sort of fairly neutral and compassionate sort of angle to it all. There's not, the terrifying skull with the scythe, or just senseless absence for no reason at all.
As soon as the kid was sort of taken into the graveyard, I stopped worrying about him. From then on, I was never worried about his health. I knew he'd be all right till the end of the book. For the first chapter, you're worried because, Jack could be the star of the book, and therefore, this baby could be dead like everyone else. And as soon as that was sort of, okay, nobody is the focus, or they called him nobody.
Yes.
I wasn't worried through all his other adventures, because it felt like a cozy children's book. It's like Christopher Robin isn't in danger when he meets the bear,
Yeah. it sort of moves from a kind of horrifying serial killer story straight into a kind of dreamlike, fantastic tale at that point. And yeah, exactly. You relax, you think, you settle down, you think, oh, okay, this will be all right. And it's probably not. It's not until we get much later in the book when there's some adventures outside in the real world again. It's always the real world that's the terrifying place, not the graveyard. It's sort of that sort of polarity sort of persists all the way through.
But I think that's writing for children. Home is safe and the outside world is scary.
Yeah.
That's exactly how kids understand the world. And I did love the way that Neil Gaiman just the occasional sentence, which is wonderful, the descriptions on the gravestones. I sort of want Neil Gaiman to write a note for my gravestone.
So every time they pass a gravestone, there's a brackets and a quote with what the actual quote on the gravestone is, and some of them are really quite humorous. Yeah. But
my favourite of all wasn't on a gravestone. The line was, "There were people you could hug." And then there was Silas. Mm-hmm. Thought, yep, that's a lovely line.
So, John, what did you reckon of the setup then? Did that get you interested, or?
Well, throughout the entirety of it, it's building up to this really intriguing world where, it's just everything slightly beyond normality and out there. The classical fantasy, you don't really know what's going on kind of thing.
Well, it's a sort of persistent Gaiman theme through pretty much everything he writes, this other world that we don't quite know about.
And he's getting incredibly good at it. Mm-hmm. He manages, with very little effort, to make a world which is just really compelling and you want to know about it.
I found myself sort of quite tantalised and sort of a little bit frustrated with the lack of much more examination and exploration. There's a lot of very, very interesting but thrown away hooks and as we go through the stories.
Well, there's one thing that really stands out to me, which we'll cover at the end when certain things have been revealed. But I actually liked the idea that it didn't go into too much detail. Yeah, there are these places and these people who do things, but you don't know what they are because the kid never really wants to know or needs to know.
Yeah.
So,
I suppose in context, yeah.
I think other writers would have gone out of their way to explain everything and give you pages and pages of exposition and say, this is where this place came from, this is where this town came from, all of that.
Sort of turned it into a D&D source book, yeah.
Yeah, and he knows he doesn't need to because that's not the story he's telling.
Yeah, there can be a virtue in not explaining everything in excruciating detail. Yeah. I think somewhere there's a happy medium. I'd found myself wanting to know more, but I suppose that's the point. Yeah,
yeah. I think the ideal is you want more at the end of it, and you don't get it.
Not had
so your imagination. It does actually give you a lot of imagination, free form to just come up with other things. And the other thing is, it's quite an achievement to have a small child who isn't monumentally irritated.
Oh yeah.
It's quite brilliant how well he has this kid who is in a weird situation, but even when he does the wrong thing, you're still on his side. You don't, you know it's wrong.
He's a serious young man.
Like him.
Yeah. You don't find irritating. You don't want to see bad things happen to.
When he does wrong, he admits he does wrong quite quickly and realises it.
So what follows then is basically a series of chapters, each of which works pretty well as a sort of self-contained little story in its own right, very much like the narrative structure of the Jungle Book itself, which is again divided into various small stories. So the second one, so chapter 2 is the new friend. This is basically Bod's now about 2 or 3. And he's basically living on this graveyard, sort of effectively haunting it, but learning to get quite good at not being noticed, but bumps into a small child who's out wandering on the common with their parents having a picnic, and then basically makes friends. And then they decide to explore one of the oldest graves, and they come across some terrifying screaming apparition and an ancient tomb that goes back sort of thousands of years, the bottom of which is a thing called the Sleer, which is this sort of disembodied, barely perceptible giant snake thing, which is guarding a series of artifacts, a knife, a brooch, and a cup, in expectation of the return of the master, and keeps asking all sorts of awkward questions about it. And of course, obviously, the obvious problem. Apparently, somebody died in there, but it turns out they couldn't see down the stairs and tripped and fell. But the obvious danger, which surprisingly Bod picks up on and doesn't go through with, is taking the trinkets on the pedestal there. And the child, the friend Scarlet is missing for so long that the police get called, and then they get when she comes back and tells the parents where she's been. She's only like 3 or 4 as well. They pass it off as an imaginary friend, and then shortly after the child and her family move to Scotland because of disturbing influences and so on. This one it didn't. There was a little bit of exposition about graveyard life and so on, but there wasn't a lot going on. This definitely felt like a sort of setup for something else that would happen later, which, as it turns out, was the case.
But it's also a simple story because it's being told about a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
And the stories get more complicated when he's 10 or 12. So it makes sense that this would be a fairly simple story at this stage.
Yeah, there is that sense as they go through the sort of thoughts and things that Bod gets involved in and is doing become more complicated in a good sort of pace to match his actual aging through the story, which is very skillfully done. Yeah. So then there's chapter 3, which I think is probably the first one I quite enjoyed, was the Hounds of God, which is basically where Silas has to go away. Silas, who's we're now fairly sure that Silas is actually a vampire, and a proper vampire too. None of this sort of Lost Boys or sparkling nonsense.
Yeah, there's no sparkling with Silas.
No, he's not a sparkly man. He's this very sort of staid presence that is impeccably correct and precise at all times. I got this sort of Jeeves feel off of him as well, but also a sense that this is something really powerful that is just quietly getting on with his own thing and biding his time.
The first hint was sort of something along the lines of he didn't know what banana tasted like. Silas only ate one thing and it wasn't banana.
That's right. And he lives in the abandoned chapel in the middle of the graveyard, and he's not actually one of the ghosts, but he's sort of regarded as a good sort and a caretaker of the place. But he has to go away on a mysterious errand, and so he arranges for a replacement guardian for the duration, a tutor called Miss Lupescu, a grey-haired old woman who
we, as the wise grown-ups reading this story, immediately had suspicions about, but of course Bod didn't.
Anyone who knows Silas is probably not conventional, no. But so she's quite a strict teacher, and there's a bit of sort of schoolchild type rebellion thing going on there, the lessons, and so Bod runs off to explore the graveyard and go down the end he's not supposed to go down, and he stumbles across the one unmaintained grave that every graveyard has, which turns out to be a portal to Ghoulheim or something. I can't remember what the place is called.
The Ghoul Gate.
The Ghoul place. Yeah. Yes. And he gets captured by a bunch of ghouls who want to take him to the Ghoul City and turn him into a ghoul, and it turns out that...
I love they had all fancy names, and then you found out later how the ghouls name themselves, which is a brilliant concept. They feed on the rotted corpses of the great and the good for their first meal, and then they take the name of the great and the good they've just eaten.
So one of them's called the Mayor of London, and the other one's like King so-and-so.
The Emperor of China. Yeah.
So they don't seem necessarily malevolent or evil. They just think everyone should be like them. So they're taking Bod off to the city, and he want to turn him into a ghoul. There's a bit of threat and peril there.
Well, the fact that when they get a bit fed up with him, their idea is to bury him, wait till he rots a bit, then eat him.
They're
not nice, no. But Miss Lupescu comes in and rescues Bod.
Thanks to his education, you see.
Yes.
She'd been teaching him how to say help in every language known to the
And these night
multiverse.
Creatures like that, things that also inhabit the ghoul helm, are actually good creatures who do come in and help him. And then Miss Lupescu rescues him in her actual werewolf form. Mm-hmm. And then they get on much better afterwards. It's a simple little tale. But it sort of hints at a greater world and more interesting things out there. But
it starts to suggest that there's more going on than just a child in a graveyard. This is the beginning of the hints about why he was
Bod is important.
Why Bod was attacked in the first place.
Yeah.
And jumping forward a little bit, one of my favourite it's just a couple of sentences. I loved the story of Miss Lupescu and Silas and their two friends who are an Ifrit and a mummy and a mummy who are doing basically a D&D adventure to rid the world of evil.
There's some sort of meanwhile elsewhere type thing going on, yeah.
And there's 4 of them and a pig. Because the mummy's got a pig under his arm who he thinks is lucky and keeps him alive. And the others are looking at him like he's mad. And then one of them goes down, and then there's only 3 of us now, and the pig.
And the pig.
Look, yeah, and Miss Lupescu growls. And why do you care about the pig? It's lucky. What? And she doesn't sound convinced. Did Haroon have a pig? Haroon has been killed. Simple. It's lucky. I had it. Haroon didn't, and Haroon's dead now.
Brilliant.
It's brilliant. It's just, I love that little comic story. It's a work. I know that is a work of genius, and it's only about 20 lines, but it's a great story in itself. D&D should always be like that. Slightly insane.
Why have you got a pig? Wow,
slightly insane people. It reminds me, for instance, of Tim running around as in Guild Wars 2 with a chicken under his arm, beating everything up for an hour and a half.
Yeah. It was a pick-upable chicken. You had to put it down somewhere else to complete a quest, but it was just a chicken. I thought I'd take it with me, so I did. And spent the next hour not being able to use my weapon skills because all 5 hotkeys were locked up with a chicken, but it was important to me. Yeah, I can empathise with that. Yeah. But so this is the sort of exactly this first sort of real hints because Silas's absence, he has to go away. There's hints that there's bigger stuff going on that they sort of become more elaborate as we go through until eventually you get to the reason why. So then we got the chapter 4, the Witch's Headstones, where Bod, now about 8 or so, I don't know, he befriends the ghost of a witch who was drowned and burned to death. I think probably not even with any real proof, just witch trial stuff. And the more socially acceptable ghosts have warned him off of that end of the graveyard, and she has a reputation for being quite mischievous and so on. But it turns out she's just sort of misunderstood and quite sad and cross because she doesn't even have a headstone to mark her place. So Bod decides to get it in his head to go and sort that out, to go and get a headstone for her. Of course, he hasn't got any money or possessions, so he goes down to the Sleer's grave tomb thing and takes a bracelet, brooch thing, takes it out into the real world to a pawnbroker's shop, because Bod hasn't got much of an understanding of how life works in the real world. Takes it to the pawnbroker. The pawnbroker immediately identifies it as some pricelessly ancient relic and traps Bod in the back room and locks him in while he contacts some sinister associates and so on. And I think there's some hint there that basically this pawnbroker has got the card of the man Jack from the first bit. And
Jack turns probably out to be more than simply a murderer.
Not just a murderer, a highly influential and connected murderer on some kind of greater purpose or business.
With mystical, magical powers.
And the pawnbroker's umming about handing Bod over to the man Jack, but the disembodied witch manages to come along in spirit form and haunt Bod and help him escape, and they scarper back to the graveyard. It's sort of a taste of the real world's threats and perils there, but he does manage to get a grave for the witch in the end.
Lisa, yeah,
Lisa Hempstock, yes. What happens to the pawnbroker? Does he end up?
He ends up at the dance later.
Yeah,
he just falls unconscious, and the
Sleer warns Bod that it always returns, and it does, but I can't remember how.
Bod picks it up and takes it back, I think.
Right.
Because Elisa advises him, and he also picks up the card which could mystically summon Jack, and gives that to Silas. And then explains to Silas what's going on, and Silas says, "Yeah, the person that killed you's still out there, and it's a bit scary out there. That's why we keep you in the graveyard."
In amongst the sort of magical adventures, we're starting to get more strands of the terrifying real world happening on that level as well. Then there's another chapter called The Dance Macabre, which is a bit of a strange interlude, I think. Just basically every sort of 80 years or so, a particular flower blossoms in the graveyard and causes all the living inhabitants of the town to sort of sleepwalk up to the graveyard and then engage in dancing with the dead as well. And the Grey Lady turns up as well. And that's about it, really. It's an interesting.
No, that's important. That one, because that one is there to remind everyone that he's not dead. He isn't one of them. He's one of the living.
Yeah.
So all the dead people, his family treat him differently on that day. They sort of kick him out the grave and tidy it up for the party, and don't explain that there's going to be a party.
Because it's not really to do with him.
Both the living and the dead sort of forget about it after it happens.
Yes.
And the only people that remember are Bod, because he's sort of a bit living and
bit of
dead.
both, yeah.
And Silas, who saw what was going on, didn't get involved because he's neither living nor dead, and won't talk about it because he's not sure what he saw because he's neither the living or the dead side of the dance.
So then we go on to there's the convocation section, this interlude. This is where we get a bit of a glimpse as to what's going on with the man Jack, and it turns out that he's at some sort of what appears to be a kind of Rotary Club charity dinner type thing with a whole load of other people called Jack, and they're all sort of they're interspersed. They're sort of giving out awards for philanthropy and stuff, but meanwhile on the individual tables they're chatting about murders and global domination and so on. And you get some sort of tantalising hints that there is a kind of huge worldwide organisation of the Jacks of all trades, of which the man Jack is a member, and he's facing some kind of censure because he hasn't managed to sort out this child yet. And apparently, if this child is rumoured to be able to bring about the end of this Jacks of all trades organisation, you don't really get much more than that. So it was an odd thing.
Well, I think
mystery evil, basically.
Mystery evil organisation that exists, to kill the child? The child will end their organisation.
Isn't that sort of the point at the end? So
yeah, you don't really get a sense of what this organisation exists to do when they're not hunting toddlers, you know?
Well, you get the feeling it's just generally the
general
bad
global
work
evil
for everybody.
Yeah.
They're the people you hire to do things.
Yeah, they're sort of evil, mystical mercenaries who travel between the multiverse, killing people for a living.
Could be.
And being named after various famous Jacks. Like there's a Jack Tar and a Jack Sprat and a Jack, whatever. Jack
and a Jumping Jack Flash. There's no Jumping Jack Flash.
There's no Jumping Jack Flash. There should be a Jumping Jack. There probably is, but he probably died before the story started.
So then we back to the next chapter 6, which is Bod decides that he's missing out and wants to go to school in the traditional sense that actual children do generally. But of course he is sort of part ghost and has all sorts of weird problems to answer about where do you go each day and all that sort of thing. So he basically manages to argue Silas into letting him try it. And he has to keep himself really low profile by using his fantastic powers of fading and not being noticed and that sort of thing, and just starts turning up in classes at the local school. It starts to go well, but then he ends up getting set upon by two class bullies, and because he can't help sort of stepping in and stopping this bullying, it manages to break the spell for those bullies, and they start to notice him and then get a bit more obsessed about him and start trying to ruin his life. And of course he retaliates with the various supernatural powers, which just exacerbates the problem, and it's all very complicated stuff. Eventually ends up with him being arrested by the police and almost taken in for questioning, at which point the whole thing's likely to unravel quite badly. But then the police car hits a strange body in the road, which turns out to be Silas, who hypnotises them all and takes Bod back to the graveyard. Sort of lesson learnt kind of thing.
Yeah, and he learns that this is all a bad idea and he really shouldn't try and go into the real world yet. He's not ready for it, and the real world's not ready for him.
And it really hammers home the idea that the authorities in the real world won't be on his side because they are basically doing something as a favour to their powerful relation. And that the entire thing shouldn't have happened because no warrants, no anything, and it was just basically as a favour.
I think one of the policemen is the uncle of one of the school bullies. Yeah,
he
gets called in and stuff.
Her father is somebody important.
Is it connected to the Jacks? I can't remember, but
no.
Just a bad thing.
Just one of the important people in the town, and therefore the town is on his side.
So that sort of ends Bod's sort of early attempts to try and live a normal life. He ends up back in the graveyard, continue growing up. So then chapter 7, which sort of brings it all to a bit of a head, really. He's 14 now at this point? Something like that. And
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, Silas has gone missing.
No, he'd be 12, wouldn't he? Because chapter 1, he's just been born.
So it's every 2 years. Yeah. So anyway, Silas has gone missing, and I think this is where the sort of off the side thing with the pig is happening. And the graveyard doesn't know what to do about Bod, and but generally generally he's left to his own devices. At the same time, Scarlett, the kid from much earlier, has sort of moved back to the neighbourhood, and she bumps into a man in the graveyard who's doing rubbings of gravestones and doing local history and stuff, and they get on famously. And it turns out that Scarlett and Bod sort of meet up, remember each other, and so on. And the graveyard rubbing chap, Mr. Frost, I spotted this, see, Mr. J. Frost.
It was a bit obvious, but then it's a kid's book.
Is doing local history, and by coincidence is rooming in the house that Bod initially escaped at the start, and invites Bod back to perhaps learn a bit more about what happened in this house, which Bod sort of vaguely remembers. And then he does the big reveal, tries to lock him in. Bod uses his powers to escape, and then meantime, this chap's joined by 4 other Jacks who turn up, and they all go chasing them off to the graveyard. And there's a lot of running about and falling in holes and being terrified off and captured by ghouls and things.
And it turns out those 4 Jacks are the last Jacks of the Jacks of all trades, because the gang of reprobates that sort of look after Bod have been slaughtering all the others.
The honour guard,
yeah.
Well, that's what I really like about this, because they probably wouldn't have been doing that if Bod hadn't come along, because they're not actually special people. They just are of their worlds. And so the entire prophecy, which is this kid will come along and destroy everyone, all that in my favourite way of prophecies happens because the prophecy exists and the people are trying to stop it happening. And by making it stop happening,
they've caused it to happen harder,
And I always like that in a good prophecy.
Self-fulfilling, So, Bod's involvement's relatively minor. He manages to give one of them the slip, who falls into an open grave and breaks his ankle. I think he survives the end of it all. Then he manages to trick a couple of them into the ghoul gravestone, and they end up falling through it and into the ghoul dimension and carried off.
I don't think they survived.
They probably didn't survive, no. And then the man Jack himself chases Bod down into the big ancient tomb with the Sleer in it. And of course, the man Jack, being a bit stupid and a bit greedy, immediately senses an opportunity when the Sleer goes, "Are you my master?" Because the Sleer's main purpose is to find the master and keep him safe. And so Jack says, "Yes, I'm the master. You must do as I say." And the Sleer encoils him, drags him through a wall, and that's the last we ever see of Jack.
In a
Frost,
way that has been obvious to everyone reading for a while.
Yeah. That whole tomb is basically a trap that Bod has been carefully not tripping for the whole book, and you could sort of think, this might come in handy again at the end. Meanwhile, of course, Scarlett sees all this happening as well and is party to all this, and she's so freaked out by it all that Silas returns and has to mind wipe her a bit, the old Man in Black red light thingy, and she goes away not knowing Bod and not remembering anything about it all.
And moving back to Scotland.
Yeah, they go back to Scotland again. So, which leaves the final chapter, which is just a short one and is essentially a kind of Bod realising that his powers of the graveyard are fading and he's growing up, and everyone knows it's time he's going to move on soon. So Silas produces a passport and some money for him, and off he goes with an unknown new life ahead of him, with no threats of sinister men with knives.
And there's a few hints over the previous couple of chapters in that the witch girl, who was close friends with him for a while, he's getting older and therefore turning into a young man.
Yes.
And she starts to avoid him because she doesn't want anything to do with young men. That's what got her into trouble in the first place. So because everybody else in the graveyard never grows up, they stay the same age as they ever were.
Yeah,
so
when they died.
The kids he played with when he was very young are now, still that age, and he's 10 years older. So it feels like time for him to leave, and it's really well written. I know it's a sort of a slightly downbeat ending, but it felt
poignant,
inevitable.
Certainly.
Yeah, it felt inevitable.
You couldn't
and it
really
felt like the right way to end
much
it.
happier ending than that. No, I mean, you wouldn't expect his parents to spring back to life or anything like that, or the whole thing to have undone itself.
It's the inevitable ending, isn't it? Because it's a kid's book, and at the end of a kid's book, they always have start dead parents, then
always,
always.
I think you're misreading some children's books, but okay, go on.
It must have been implied in a lot of them, yeah.
No, they're just adopted and haven't been told of those ones. And then goes through Hazard Ventures, and at the end, normality. Get on with your life. It's fine. You've had your life is to be looked forward to and enjoyed. Go and enjoy it now.
Well, I think that sort of device. I mean, I was sort of reading your notes there, and you were saying it was something to do with the Great War there. But I think that literary device is, you've got to get the parents out of the way and off the scene, because they're just going to tell the kid not to have adventures and not to have fun. You can't cut loose as a child with adventures if the parents are just lurking around the place the whole time. So by whatever device, it could be dead parents, or it could be. I'm thinking of the Narnia stuff. They're all sent to the country because of the Blitz and so on. So there are no sort of authoritarian parent figures around to sort of stamp on everything, and well, in this case, the dead parents. I found it a little bit incongruous though, because what we have here is a world where everyone becomes a ghost after they die, and they're there and doing their things and stuff. And God has ghost seeing and talking to powers. Could he not go and visit his own real parents? Presumably they're buried somewhere and become ghosts in a different graveyard.
Yeah, but a different graveyard, and he's been kept in this graveyard.
It's that specific
one.
So
he might be able to.
Doesn't he escape from the pawn shop into another graveyard somewhere where there are some other people?
Yeah, but probably not the modern graveyard. That's sort of an industrial complex on the outskirts of the town.
Crematorium or something. Yeah.
Exactly, where the modern sort of people are buried. So, even the youngest of the people in the graveyard he's in are probably 100 or 150 years old. That's why he never met his parents again. They went on to other things.
Yeah,
elsewhere. They probably didn't know about this ruling on where you get buried and such like when they were alive, so they're probably buried in a different town because they're buried where their parents are from or whatever. Who's going to decide where they get buried? Their parents.
I don't know. I'm sorry.
They did make it very clear though that you still get a ghost even if you're cremated, because the witch was burnt.
Yes,
I thought that was very specific.
Yes. Yeah. So overall, what do we think? So the overall sort of pacing and delivery of it all, enjoyable read. I found it quite light, definitely lighter going than most of the books we've done so far.
I loved it. I listened to the audiobook, which is read by the author, and one thing Neil Gaiman can do is tell his own stories. He has a turn when it comes to reading a book, which is just something that a lot of other authors do not have.
I remember the BBC 4 Extra did a Good Omens full cast thing a while back. I think Peter Saranovich and Mark Heap as the ghost, as the demon and angel there, and I think Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman both had cameos in there as the policeman when the car gets zapped by demonic powers and stuff. And you could tell that Gaiman was more comfortable with the role. And
Pratchett always seems weird when he turns. He turned it up on one of the TV shows versions and was really, really uncomfortable.
Perhaps not a classically trained actor, but then I don't suppose Neil Gaiman is.
Also, when that Good Omens thing was around,
I think he was
Terry
quite ill,
Pratchett was already unwell, so But Neil Gaiman first started writing this about 20 years before it was published for his younger son, who he saw sort of on his trike in a graveyard, and that gave him the idea. And then he started writing it and realised he wasn't a good enough writer yet, so put it to one side. And
something other authors should learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And then came back to it years later, kept on trying, and eventually, when I think his youngest children were about the right age, it pushed him into doing it again, and he felt he was able to then write the story as he wanted it to be.
So sort of a good idea that you can quite work out how to do.
Yeah, that's a good tale, and that's a good author's story about his writing. Yeah, but it does feel like yes, he got this right. He's been working towards this kind of story for a while. The sort of the magic, mystical
there was a lot of similarities, I spotted very, very similar themes to a lot of Gaiman's other work. Neverwhere, there was sort of aspects to that as well. There's aspects of Coraline, I think, as well. And
The Sandman, which was sort of the first thing he really came up with. And I'm glad he read the book. I'm going to have to look for that now, because
it's definitely
I'd love to hear his version of it. But yeah, I love it too. I think it is one of, probably in 200 years, this is the children's story from this era that will still live long, like Winnie the Pooh and Wind in the Willows, and the famous classic
Well, it's
stories.
essentially a retelling of the Jungle Book, isn't it? I mean, you got Silas as Bagheera, I think, probably, and then Shere Khan as the man Jack, and then the various other minor characters in the graveyard as the various animals. Miss Lupescu as Car? I don't know, but there are definitely sort of
possibly you're pushing it a little bit far at that stage, but yes, and you're right. There is a similarity.
But the sort of various animal mentor figures replaced one for one with creepy undead monsters.
It's not a direct copy. It's more inspired by. He wanted to have the same feeling, and therefore wrote this book. It has the same feeling as the Jungle Book, which I haven't read in a while. But again,
I don't think I've ever read it. I think I've only ever seen the cartoon.
The books are really good. I would recommend the first and second.
I probably should
Jungle
have a go at that at some point. Yeah, just to round up my education.
Well, we should push for that to win a retro Hugo, then you'll have to read it.
Why not? So we come to the question, what's this doing in the Hugos? I mean, obviously, we've seen Harry Potter win as well.
Because occasionally they let a good book in.
There's not nearly enough laser swords or rocket spaceships or time travel in this book, but yeah, it strikes me as a very un-Hugo book. And I know you guys like them when they're like that, but
and you look at what it was up against. Those are very famous writers.
So we got Little Brother by Cory Doctorow that year, and Anthem by Neil Stevenson, your favourite author, John. We got Saturn's Children by Charles Stross and Zoe's Tale by John Scalzi. So a lot of those are, I don't know really much about those other. I mean, you recognise the names, certainly the authors, but
Cory Doctorow is quite well known now as a writer.
He's mostly well known for Twitter, isn't he?
And website, but he does a lot of younger fiction, doesn't he? His stuff he does a lot of stuff aimed at younger people as well, I think. I don't actually read an awful lot of his stuff.
But there's no sort of massively iconic titles in there that I go, oh, that should have won.
There's a Neil Stevenson who's usually okay, but it's not a book that really has made much of a mark.
Yeah, I don't really know anything about Anthem itself. I mean, it seems perhaps a bit sour grapes or churlish to say that Neil Gaiman had an easy year that year, but I mean, that's entirely down to who else is nominating what else. But no, this certainly does deserve to win. But I don't see any really strong, crushing competition.
Yeah, I think what it was is that Neil Gaiman had this sort of overwhelming sort of energy behind him. People loved the Sandman books from years previously.
He's a very popular man. Yeah.
They're grown up, and therefore they go to conventions, and therefore they say, "Oh, I want Neil Gaiman to win a Hugo." So there was probably a lot of energy behind a push for him to win one that there wasn't for Neil Stevenson, because
2009 would have been
wrong year.
Significantly before all the puppy nonsense really became a thing.
Yeah.
So this would have been just the prior small affair that the Hugos had been up to this day and age.
It was also when Gaiman was beginning to get really, really popular.
Mm-hmm.
So what else we got? Let's have a dramatic presentation long form for this year. We had Wall-E. That was the winner.
Yeah.
I like that film.
That's a good film.
It's a brilliant film.
Just the opening section.
Again, you could say very much a kid-friendly film.
Yeah. It did well. That was up against The Dark Knight, Iron Man, Hellboy 2, The Golden Army,
Not aimed at kids.
Metropolis. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and the short form was Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog, which I have seen.
Yeah, love it.
I'm not sure that's kid-friendly.
Silence in the Library Forest of the Dead Doctor Who episode.
Don't care.
Turn Left Doctor Who episode.
Which is actually a good episode of Doctor
Battlestar Galactica.
Which is...
Revelations. Was that one of the ones where they finally tried to explain what the hell was going on for the last 5 years?
It was one of the Galactica's getting quite late on. We better give it all the awards because it's going away soon. And we still remember how good 33 was.
And the episode, it never really got better than 33, did it? That was the best one. Like, the second episode of the proper series. It's just crazy. It was the first, wasn't it? After the pilot series.
Yeah.
And sort of went slowly downhill from there on, really. The Constant episode of Lost. I've never seen Lost.
Speaking of going downhill after a first season.
Yes.
Lost.
So that was the Hugo. Oh, there was all sorts of other categories, of course, but that was the
I
Hugo.
really can't argue with any of those winners. I mean, you've got the Graveyard Book, Wally, and Dr. Horrible Sing-Along. That's a cracking weekend, to be honest.
That's a good lineup, yeah. Do them all. So, yeah, summing up then. What do we think then, John?
I think that we like Neil Gaiman, and he should write more books. He might have a bit of a talent. He should consider writing another book.
We'll probably get to American Gods, the 2003 winner, I think.
We've sort of been putting that off till after the TV show comes out.
Yeah, because the TV show's out at the moment. We think it's out at the moment. I think it's out premiering in the US at the moment. So you can find that on Stars with a Z if you're in the US.
Apparently it's on about 2 weeks here, yeah.
Amazon Prime for the rest of the world, apparently. And apparently it's very good. It's got Ian Lovejoy McShane as Mr. Wednesday. So, which I think might work. But yes, we'll probably cover the actual book in a future episode. So, but next week for those playing along at home.
Next month.
I've skipped over Toerag. Next week, what's going on? Yes, Dr. T, what did you think of the book? Obviously, you picked it.
I did pick overall. It. I'm very glad I picked it. It's. I would recommend everybody, whatever your age, read this children's book. It's really, really good.
Yeah, I'd go with that.
And it's a good entry into Neil Gaiman, because if you read this, you're probably going to like some of his other stuff too. It's my favourite.
Overall, I enjoyed it as well, despite it being a kid's book. I found, I'm very much the doorstopper enthusiast of this podcast, so I found myself wanting more explanations and more depth and more detail, but and wanting it to be perhaps another 400 pages long, but that might just be me. Very good, though, very good. Short and to the point and very good. So, yes, as I was saying, next week, next month.
Give me more time to read it.
No, we're going to do one a week now. I think we're not getting through these things fast enough. Well, actually, for me, it'll probably be next week, because I've got still doing this blinking Hugo nominee challenge for the 2017 lineup.
Good luck with that.
Yes, the Obelisk Gate, N.K. Jemisin. It's a bit grim. Spoilers there. So, yeah, anyway, next time on this show, we'll be looking at the seminal 1985 winner, Neuromancer, by William Gibson. So I imagine we'll have lots to talk about there. So with that, we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.